So today we begin with do you remember when Max Kellerman famously predicted that Tom Brady was about to fall off a cliff? Well, he was totally wrong about that, but I have to say I am not wrong that a certain 19-year NBA veteran on this Minnesota Timberwolves team has totally and utterly, without a doubt at this point, fallen off a cliff. But for some reason, head coach Chris Finch appears to have not received the memo. Welcome back to the Timberwolves Digest. As always, North America, I'm Dave Dabbah, and I bring you daily Minnesota Timberwolves news, trade reports, trade rumors, and of course, a whole lot of commentary. On today's show, we are going to discuss what the Timberwolves should actually do about this Mike Conley situation that we now have in front of us. Now, if you are new to the Timberwolves Digest, please go ahead and subscribe. Now, I always like to start every show out by asking you a question. Should we trade or keep Mike Conley at this point? North America, I want to know what your thoughts and opinions are on Mike Conley. Now, if we do decide to actually go ahead and pull the trigger on Mike Conley's $10 million plus contract and trade him away, who would you want the Timberwolves to actually trade him away for? Now, I've put together a short list of what I consider to be affordable options for the Minnesota Timberwolves to actually make a trade in which you would be dumping Mike Conley at this point. And depending on who you do a deal with, you might also have to trade Rob Dillingham away as well. I think certainly from a play perspective, it is absolutely time for the Timberwolves to admit that they do have a point guard problem. And it's kind of funny, as if the Timberwolves organization seems to be struggling with that very realization. Now, Mike Conley has totally fallen off the cliff at this point. He has scored a whopping 0 points in his last 2 games. That is costing us, for that kind of performance, just around or just north of $10 million this year. Clearly, something needs to be done at this point. I want to know what you think, North America. And of course, I think one of the big questions that needs to be asked is, why does Chris Finch not realize what the rest of us actually realize? Plus, I would also love to know why Chris Finch only played Bones Highland for 4 minutes in the loss to the Utah Jazz the other night, when Mike Conley actually played 15 minutes in the game and posted 0 points. But before we dive into today's Timberwolves news, this video is brought to you by Kalshi. Download Kalshi by using the link below and enter code DIGESTNBA, and you'll get $20 when you trade your first 100. Kalshi is the largest prediction market in the U.S. On the platform, you can trade yes or no on real-time events like sports, elections, news, and pretty much anything. And whether you're in California or Texas or anywhere else in the country, Kalshi is now available in all 50 states for sports fans. Trade on game outcomes, playoff chances, or player performances, all on a regulated market where you can cash out at any time. Personally, I see real value in the Timberwolves winning 55-plus games. Remember, they won 56 games last season. So look, Kalshi is generally a smarter way to use your sports or news knowledge. And of course, you can close positions whenever you want. Download Kalshi with the link in the description. Don't forget to use code DIGESTNBA to get your $20 bonus. Once again, I want to thank Kalshi for sponsoring today's video. So it's not just me. Here's an article from Sports Illustrated from a little earlier in the day. Mike Conley reaches level of futility Wolves haven't seen in a decade. And then they go on to say in the article that Chris Finch and the Minnesota Timberwolves organization at this point, and now I'm paraphrasing, but basically needs to come to terms with the fact that Mike Conley is done from a career perspective at this point. So why not go ahead and try to use the Mike Conley asset if you can to make a move for another point guard? I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions on that topic. Who do you think we should actually trade Mike for? Now, the cliff is not imagined. This cliff that Mike Conley has fallen off of is a real cliff. And if we take a look back from a statistical standpoint at Mike Conley's last 6 years, you can see the steady, and I do mean this, steady drop off, especially over the last 2 seasons. And it has gotten to the point where at least last year, we could rely on Mike Conley to actually deliver some clutch three-pointers because he was shooting north of 41% from the three-point arc. But now he's even struggling to hit the rim. 33.9% is what Mike's actually averaging from the three-point arc at this point. Clearly, as far as I'm concerned, the time has come to absolutely move on from Mike Conley. Drop your comments in North America. I want to know what you think. And finally, just taking a look back at the Timberwolves loss, horrible loss, by the way, to the Utah Jazz. By the way, next up for the T-Wolves is a game in Chicago, a game that they should win. Of course, I said the same thing about that Utah game. Now, we saw Ant-Man go for 38, played a great game across the board. No complaints here when I'm talking about the Ant-Man. He looked like he did get a little tired there in the fourth quarter because he's had to orchestrate the entire offense for the most part during clutch moments of the game. And that was certainly one of the reasons they ended up losing. I also highlighted Mike Conley as well as Bones Hyland. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I'm not really sure exactly what Chris Finch was doing by not giving Bones Hyland some more time. I think over the past couple months, Bones Hyland has absolutely earned the right to be in some of these close games, especially against a team like Utah that had their own point guard, and Keontae George, who went for a career-high 43 and was shooting threes into, like, the ocean. He was just making them from left and right all night long. And certainly from a defensive perspective, I think Bones Hyland would have done a better job on Keontae George than what we ended up displaying against him in that game. Drop your comments in North America. I want to know what your thoughts and opinions are. All right. That's all I've got for you today. Once again, do we trade or keep old man Mike Conley, who has clearly skied all the way down the backside of Career Mountain? And as I like to say, he's waiting for his Uber or Lyft to pick him up at this point. As always, for the Timberwolves Digest, I'm Dave Dabbah, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing day.